Welcome. I am Karen Rae, and this is Fave at 5, and I have a special guest here with me today, Jodi Schilling, and she is a life coach.
It's called Real Life Life Coach.
Real life life coach. Okay, you know what? We're going to be talking about a really important topic, mental health and mental health with our children. Jodi, you have 4 children. You're a busy mom. You work. You do all these different things, but yet you have been challenged. You have some special challenges in your family.
Absolutely, yes. I have had, with my 4 of my kids, all having different types of mental health diagnoses, and at different times really seriously having to take treatment, have treatment plans, or have hospitalizations. And when those crises have hit our family, we have had, as a mom, our natural instinct is to control the whole situation and take care of it all. And that's really, what through these experiences, what I've learned is how to not lose my own mental health in the process.
Okay, girls, did you hear that? So we have to take care of ourselves, and maybe even whether you have children who are struggling or perhaps it's yourself. I think there's going to be a lot of good takeaways here today. So we're going to be talking a little bit about your story, Jodi, and the struggles that and the things that you had to overcome and work with, and a little bit about the hope. So let's start with a little bit about your story.
4 kids that I have, each have had their unique, as we all know as moms, they're all unique, and they can come from the same parents and have the same parenting, but they all have their own unique challenges. And so in our family, we've experienced mental health challenges that were showing up when my kids were younger, and now they're young adults. And through those processes, we've seen both autism spectrum, we've seen bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, so some significant diagnoses. And these mental health and mental illness is a real thing. And so I think one of the first things to acknowledge about that is that society doesn't want us to talk about it very much. There's so much stigma and shame around that. And that's, when my kids were going through this, I was also in education, and so I was seeing it from the classroom and the teacher perspective, but then also as a mom at home.
So what was that like? And did you notice things right away with your kids, or is this when there are mental health challenges, and especially when you have so many different types of things that you're dealing with, is it hard to diagnose and to figure out what is going on?
It definitely, the thing that we know right away instinctually as moms is that when our kids are not behaving well, we make that mean that we aren't disciplining them enough. And so behavior problems are kind of one of the first indicators with mental health in kids. But one of the biggest, most important things to think about, I think, with the behavior versus having a mental illness is that if there was a physical, a blood disorder or something like that, we wouldn't think at all that this was their fault, and we tend to have so much more compassion, and society has more compassion as well. But when there's a behavior problem happening, and it's often, in my experience, both as a teacher and as a mom, the same kind of thing is happening. There's neurotransmitters going off differently in that brain. That's a physical thing in the brain that's happening. So that's, one of the biggest differences is recognizing and learning. We're learning so much more about mental health and the brain. And so the more we can do that, the more compassion we can have, both for the kids that are struggling, and then also the families and the mom, ourselves.
Because it takes, you're in charge of your family, you and your husband, and how to deal with that. And so everything still moves forward.
Definitely.
Yeah, and to identify those things. And I think a lot of, like you said, a lot of people don't talk about it.
I do think that when we shine a light on it, and we are willing to talk about it, we have to be vulnerable to do that. But when we do it, and we learn more by doing that. Right. We also don't have to deal. I think as moms, we think that we have to put on that brave face. Definitely.
Yes. What is it about that, huh?
Yes. And so then we're in isolation, and we're really, trying to handle it all on ourselves, by ourselves, is as we know.
Yes.
It doesn't
Yes.
work.
So that is why I wanted Jodi to come, is because, you know what, I have found myself, and this is one of the reasons I started Faith Lifestyles, is because I realized to get through life, sometimes you just need help, and you need to be, I just feel like education is power. And yeah, there's just so much. Tell us a little bit about the struggles and the overwhelm. Do women, moms feel guilty? What are some of the emotions that go along with mental health issues in your kids?
Yes, I think naturally one of the things, just because we are just wired to protect our kids, that's mother instinct that kicks in. So when we see that they're struggling and they're in pain, we have a belief that we did something wrong, kind of initially. That's kind of where, if you've ever, just even if your kids are not in crisis, but they're struggling and they're in pain, you think, what went wrong here? Something has gone terribly wrong. And so we have this tendency to want to fix it right away. And when we do that, we also are having this background knowledge, or this background tape playing in our head, that we're trying to prove that we did it wrong. And it's the way the brain wants to be right about something. So if you have an initial thought that you did something wrong or something is wrong, then your brain's going to try to find the evidence of that. And so then that's why you have that going on, and you feel that tangled thought mess in your head, because you're wanting to solve the problem in the moment, but you're having this guilt and then the other layered emotion that can come on top of that is we can feel shame. And so this is where we have those other beliefs about society tells us that we should be a good mom, or we should do it all. And so then we bring shame on top of it. Both of those emotions, guilt and shame, are not useful.
Yeah. How do you, as a mom, then deal with, once finding out that there is that guilt, there is that shame? What's the next step?
The best thing that I can say that has worked for me, that really helped me, was to recognize that there are things that are happening in the world and for our kids that we think that they're wrong or that they shouldn't be happening. And the fact that they are happening, the fact that mental illness is a real thing, that really is normal. I mean, that is actually, it's really hard for us to get our head around that, but when you just say mental illness is real, because it is.
Yes, and I don't know one family that it doesn't affect.
Exactly. And so it's just like that
there.
Initial acceptance right there really is one of the first places to start. That's where I was talking about coming from a clean space, is that we're not having this resistance that this is wrong and this is bad, and then all the things that we're making it mean about us. All of that we can set aside and say mental illness exists. It is a real thing that we have in our life, and we can also acknowledge it, not to sugarcoat it or minimize it, but to say it's impacting our family, it's impacting our kids, it's impacting us. But then when we're thinking what's our next step, we're doing it from, okay, this is a real thing and it's impacting us, but we have more agency over it, instead of that feeling of this shouldn't be happening, it's wrong, I did something wrong, the world is wrong. It just doesn't help.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And so you have your children, you recognize, okay, here's the situation. And, because some of that, you don't have control over.
Exactly. And that's the other piece of it. It's realizing that this is the part I don't have control over. The part I do have control over is how I choose to respond. And so when you're thinking from the place of, crisis is a real thing. And when you are in it as a family, you know that we talk about being in crisis mode, right? And so the part of our brain that we're trying to address this crisis with is often the lower part of our brain that is not the best part to be having creative solutions and problem solving. It's the part of our brain that wants to fight or flight. It's the one that's like on alert. This is dangerous.
Right.
So we want to try to override that part of our brain and be able to access the part of our brain that can think clearly and plan. And so that's the part too. It's recognizing that this situation may be out of my control, but I can get my brain in a place where I can think and respond the way I want to. So that's a skill that
Needs to be learned.
that can be learned.
Well, that's great, and that gives us hope too, because
Yes.
I think all of us can use that. I mean, we get into crisis modes. There are situations that are out of our control, or our kids, our families, all these different things. It's not just for people with children who are dealing with this. It's a really helpful tips too. So just that
Absolutely.
process. So tell us then, what are some of the solutions? Because you work with people in families and
Yes.
with kids who have some challenges there.
Definitely. One of the first solutions that I like to offer people in boundary setting, one of the things that's surprising about boundaries, we think that boundaries, when we're talking about kids with behaviors, or even when we get kids have mental illnesses that then often go into addiction, and addiction behaviors is another part of mental health that we know is a big overlap. And so one of the things about setting boundaries is that boundaries, we often think, control the other people. Like, I need to set boundaries because this person has crossed a boundary for me and harmed me. And one of the biggest solutions I offer people is that boundaries are actually set for us. They're more for when you think about a boundary being a fence that you put kind of to protect intruders from coming in your home. When you think about setting a boundary for protecting your own emotions, you're doing it not to control people that are outside of that boundary, but you're doing it for yourself. And so that's one of the biggest solutions I can offer, is how to set a boundary in a way that protects you, but also makes it clear that you're doing this in a loving way. You can love yourself and love the other person while you're still having a boundary.
So give us an example of that, like
Okay.
with maybe one of your kids. How would you set a boundary?
Yeah, so
What type of boundary?
right. So one of the things that often happens as a mom, kids who are struggling with mental illnesses will kind of go to the safest person in their life and have their highest kind of acting out with their illness. And this is a natural thing that is not something that we need to blame anyone for. It's just that when they're struggling, they're also going to seek the person that they know they can trust the most, that they can be at their worst and mom will still love them. And so this is where, and this is actually sometimes subconscious for them, but when it happens, one of the things that we can do as moms is say, when you do this behavior, and let's say that they call and they're yelling at us on the phone because they didn't take their meds and they're just in a really bad place. So they're calling and they're saying, I don't have money, or whatever they have, whatever their kind of crisis is in the moment that's related to their mental health, but still is a big stressor for us, right? So we can set a boundary and say, when you call yelling the F word at me, I will tell you that I will talk to you when you're calm. So you're setting a boundary that behavior, when it crosses, whenever that happens, that's crossing a boundary. This is what I will do. And that's the difference, because that's where you have the agency of saying, this is what I will do. And then the wonderful side effect is that it does change the behavior on the other side, but that's not initially what you don't want to come
I
at
know,
it from
I
that
was
angle.
liking that. Yeah, exactly. Because
So-
you're putting it back on yourself.
Yeah, you're
Yes.
saying this is what
I'm
I
going
will
to do.
And then you also have in your mind, when you have that kind of as a tool ready
Yeah.
to go. So when you're feeling like there's a panicky situation happening, or you can say, I have a plan, and you do have a plan because you have your boundary already preset.
Yes, I'm just so glad that we can talk about this situation, because I have personally had a couple people talk about how to get support because their children have mental health issues, and they don't know where to go to get help.
Yes.
They need that support system. And I just love how you talk about this clean love, and because you have to be whole and healthy too.
Absolutely.
As the mom of these children, or maybe it's a husband or a family member or whatever, you have to
Absolutely.
be able to interact with them as well.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So is there any parting words that you would like to say?
I think the only other thing I would like to add is that I really want to always let moms know that I am not sugarcoating, as I said before, or minimizing the crisis, because I understand how it feels to be in a hospital room, waiting room situation. And so the seriousness of this, you know, we want to say, here's some solutions and here's some strategies, but I really know the real like moments where you're like, this is so overwhelming. And so that panicky feeling that you feel as a mom, I just want to tell you, I've been there. I know that, and it is real. But there is a way, the hope is that what I'm hoping to give you all is that there are some strategies and some solutions that really put you in a place where you can feel more empowered, even in the midst of crisis.
Yes. So let's let the ladies know how they can, if they want to reach out for support and chat with you, how can they get a hold of you? What's the
Right
best
now,
way?
yes. Right now, my Facebook page is the best place. I can get a private message there,
Great.
and
Perfect.
yeah, it's.
Well,
my
we'll put the
Facebook.
link in the comments for everyone.
Definitely.
So, well, Jodi, thank you for coming and chatting with us today. It's been very enlightening, and I just love the support that you are giving families.
Thank you for
Yes.
having me, Karen.
Yes.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, we'll see you next time at Fave at 5.